Hello aspirants, welcome to Epitome IAS. This is Mansoor. So we have started this Ncrt series. So far in this series we have finished 6th class Ncrt, and in today's class we are going to see 7th class Ncrt is the 5th chapter, that is water. So in previous classes we have discussed about air, and in today's classes we will be discussing about hydrosphere. Okay, so if you see this particular chapter, if you see the important topics that we are going to discuss or that we are going to learn in this chapter, so we will be seeing what is meant by water cycle, and we will be seeing the distribution of water on the surface of the earth, and we will be seeing oceanic circulations. Okay, so these are the three important topics that this particular chapter deals with. And the point to be noted here is, whatever concept we are learning here, or whatever definitions we are going to learn here, all these things are basic things. Okay, we should not expect the depth analysis or the depth concept on those particular topics, because we are going to see, we are seeing 7th class Ncrt. Okay, so if you move on to 11th class and 12th class Ncrt, there in those Ncrts again we will be recalling all these things or all these fundamentals which we have already learned in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th as well as 10th Ncrts. Okay, there we will be detailedly discussing, or detailedly we will be learning the concepts. Okay, but the point here is, in this classes, in this 7th class Ncrt, we should be knowing the basic fundamental definitions of all the important topics that were introduced in this particular chapters. Okay, so without any further delay, if you see here, in this particular chapter, as I told you earlier, what we are going to see is, we are going to see water cycle. Okay, so first of all we will be seeing what is meant by water cycle, right? So in order to understand these water cycles, we should be knowing what is meant by precipitation. Second, we should be knowing what is meant by condensation. Third, we should be knowing what is meant by evaporation. Okay, then we should be knowing what is meant by percolation, and fifth thing is runoff. Okay, so if you are able to recall, or if you are able to understand these five particular topics or these five particular phenomena, then we will be understanding what is meant by a water cycle. So first of all, out of these five phenomena, we should be knowing what is meant by evaporation, because this water cycle starts with evaporation. So what is meant by evaporation? We all know that evaporation is nothing but conversion of liquid into water vapor. Where it is happening and how it is going to happen, if you see, first of all we will be seeing where this evaporation will happens. So obviously evaporation will happens where there is availability of water. For example, in seas we will be having water, in oceans we will be having water, in rivers we will be having water, in ponds we will be having water. Now what happens? The water which is present in all these water bodies will get evaporated because of sunlight. Are you getting my point? So the point here is, in evaporation what we are going to see, the liquid form is converted into vapor form. Okay, the first step in water cycle is evaporation. So liquid form will be converted into vapor form, and all the vapors that were created or that were generated from this evaporation will be traveling into the atmosphere. Okay, because the weight of water vapor will be lesser, so it will be lifted in atmosphere. Now what happens when after evaporating, all the water vapors in atmosphere will come to a point, and the vapors will start cooling down. So as a result of this cooling down of these water vapors, we will be getting or we will be seeing the formation of clouds. So this phenomena where water vapor gets cooled down and clouds are formed, that particular phenomena we call as a condensation. Okay, so after evaporation, that water vapor undergoes this condensation process, and then what happens? Formation of cloud will be happening. Now what happens? When once these clouds were formed, since clouds were cooler when compared to the other things, when the warm air come in contact with the clouds, the cooler particles present in a cloud will start precipitating. Are you getting my point? That means the solid thing which is present in cloud will start getting precipitating. So in precipitation you can see there are many forms. Okay, that precipitation might happen in form of rain, that precipitation might happen in form of snow, that precipitation will happen in form of ice flakes. Okay, so the point here is after condensation the process of converting those clouds into water will be started. So that particular phenomena we call as an precipitation. Okay, then what happens? For suppose if that precipitation is happening in the form of rain, all the water will be coming back to the surface of the earth in the form of rain. Now what happens? The water which is which has come back in the form of rain will start going deeper into the layers of the earth, or else we can tell that the water which has come in the form of rain will be percolating into the soil. Okay, then what happens? After some point some amount of water will be going inside the layers and some amount of water will be traveling on the surface of the earth, and that particular thing we call it as a runoff. Then what happens? This percolated water will go and will mix with the groundwater, and this runoff which is happening because of this rainfall will be going and mixing again with the water bodies such as lakes, rivers, seas and oceans. And again what happens? And again evaporation will be happening because of presence of sunlight, and then after evaporation the second process is condensation, and after condensation we will be seeing precipitation, and after precipitation we will be seeing percolation. After percolation we will be seeing runoff. So once when this cycle is continuously repeating, we will be neither losing water or will be not losing water that has been evaporated, because it will be coming back on the surface of the earth in the form of precipitation. So that is what mentioned in this particular picture. So this first paragraph talks about water cycle, importance of water cycle. Then the next important second topic that should be discussed in this particular chapter is regarding the distribution of water bodies. So if you see the distribution of water bodies, the water which is presented on the surface of the earth, we can divide that water into two things. One is the fresh water, second one is saline water. So what is meant by saline water? Saline water is nothing but the water which is having a huge quantity or a high amount of salt in that particular water. Okay, that particular thing we call it as an saline water. So what are the sources of saline water, or where we can see saline water? We can see saline water in seas, we can see saline water in oceans, we can see saline water in lakes, particularly salt water lakes. Okay, then second type of water is fresh water. Where we will be seeing fresh water? We can see fresh water in rivers, we can see fresh water in lakes, in lakes, particularly freshwater lakes, and we can see freshwater in ice caps, we can see freshwater in groundwater. Okay, we can see the fresh water in atmosphere. Okay, so these are the sources, or these are the places where we can see fresh water as well as saline water. Now the point here is, in this particular chapter we are going to see the amount of or the distribution of fresh water or distribution of saline water, or else overall we can tell that distribution of water bodies that were presented on the earth. So we are going to see how much percentage of water is present in that particular source, right? So if you see, out of 100%, majority of the water is present in oceans. So in oceans you can see 97.3% of water that is available on the earth is in the form of oceans. And we know that oceans are nothing but they are the sources for saline water. That means out of 100% of water that is present on the earth, 97% of water is salt water or saline water. Okay. In second place, we will be seeing 2.0% of water in ice caps. So ice caps are form of fresh waters, storages of fresh waters. Now these ice caps will be having 2% of water stored in them. In third place, we will be having a groundwater. So in the form of groundwater, we will be having a 0.68% of water out of 100% of available water. Again, this groundwater we can call it as an fresh water. Then freshwater lakes itself, they will be having a 0.009%. Then in fifth position, we will be having inland seas and salt lakes. Okay, inland seas and salt lakes will be having a 0.009%. So if you see here, this freshwater lakes as well as inland seas and salt lakes, they both will be having an equal amount of water. Okay, then after that we will be having atmosphere. Atmosphere is having a 0.0019% of water, and rivers will be having 0.0001% of water that was available on the surface of the earth. So the point here is atmosphere will be having, that means the water vapor which is present in atmosphere, if you compare, it will be having a huge amount of water when compared to the water which is present in rivers. Okay, so the point here is we need not to by heart these percentages, but we should be knowing the chronological order of the presence of water or the distribution of water. So in first place, obviously oceans will be having a huge amount of waters. Second, ice caps. Third, groundwater. Then fourth, freshwater lakes. In fifth position, inland seas and saltwater lakes. In sixth position, atmosphere. And in seventh position, rivers. So this chronological order, either in increasing to decreasing or decreasing to increasing order should be understood. Okay, so this is important thing here. Then the third important concept or the third important topic in this particular chapter is regarding ocean circulation. Right. So what is meant by ocean circulation? Ocean circulation is nothing but the large scale movement of water in oceans. Okay. The point here is, if you want to understand this ocean circulation, we should be knowing three important concepts. Okay, if you understood, if you are understanding the three important categories or the three important concepts that were presented in ocean, we can easily understand the ocean circulation. Okay, so or else we can tell that this oceanic circulation can be learned by knowing what is meant by wave, what is meant by tide, what is meant by current. Okay, so if we are able to understand these three concepts, then we will be easily knowing what is meant by oceanic circulation. Okay, right. So first of all, we will be knowing what is meant by wave. So what is meant by wave? Wave is nothing but it is an energy that is traveling across the surface of ocean. Now, from where this energy is coming? This energy is coming from winds. Are you getting my point? So winds will be giving the energy to the water which is presented on surface of the earth. So because of that particular energy, we will be seeing the rise and fall of the water surface. Are you getting my point? So that particular phenomena we call it as an wave. And if you notice here, wave is nothing but it is an oscillatory motion. It is an oscillatory motion or oscillatory movement of air or of water. oscillatory movement of water, and because of this oscillatory movement of water we can see the rise and the fall of the water on the surface of the ocean. Now if you see this wave, generally if you see this wave, the topmost point of the wave we call it as a crest, or we can call it as a wave crest, and the bottom of the wave we call it as a wave trough. Okay, and the distance between one crest to another crest, what we call this particular distance, we call this particular distance as wavelength. Okay, and the vertical distance between crest to the trough we call it as an wave height, and the distance between crest to the half of the wave we call it as an amplitude. Okay, so if you see the structure of these waves, the topmost point or the topmost highest point in the wave we call it as an wave crest, the lowest point we call it as an wave trough, and the distance between two crests we call it as an wavelength. And what is meant by amplitude? Half of the distance of wavelength, or sorry, half of the distance, half of the wave height we call it as an amplitude. And what is meant by wave height? The distance between the vertical distance between crest to the trough is called as an wave height. Okay, so these are the important things that should be noted regarding these waves. Okay, now the second important topic, the second important concept in this particular oceanic circulation is tides. So what is meant by tide? What is meant by tide? What is the definition of the tide? Tide is nothing but the periodical rise or the periodical fall of the water. Okay, for suppose if you consider during full moon day, new moon day, the rise of the water will be very high. Okay, the sea level of the sea will be very high. So what are the reasons for this tide? So the simplest reason is due to the gravitational force of earth and the gravitational force of sun, as well as gravitational force of moon. That means the gravitational force of moon and the sun will be influencing the water bodies that were presented on the earth's surface. So because of this influence of gravitational force, we can be experiencing tides. So if you see this tide, we can divide this tide into two things. One high tide, second one is low tide. So what happens in high tide? The water level will be obviously high in high tides. In low tides, the level of water will be somewhat low. And the point here is, when we are going to learn these high tides, we should be knowing the positioning of the earth with respect to sun and the moon. So why we should be knowing all these things? Because in tides we will be having two types of differentiations. One spring tides, second neap tides. Obviously during the spring tides and neap tides we will be we will be experiencing high tide and low tide. That is different. But when we call a tide as a spring tide, when the sun, the moon, the earth are in straight line. So when moon is in between the sun and the earth, we call that particular positioning as a full moon day. Because during when moon is presented between sun and the earth, we will be experiencing the full moon, that is Paurnima, on from the surface of the earth. So during these phenomena, we will be having a huge amount of gravitational force of sun as well as moon acting on the water bodies on the earth. Now what happens when earth is in between moon and the sun? During this time as well, we will be having a high influence of gravitational force of moon and the sun on the earth. Even during this time, during this time as well, we will be having high tides, and this particular phenomena we call it as an spring tide. Then there is another type of tide that is called neap tide. So when does these neap tides happen? this neap tide will be happening when Earth, Sun and Moon are perpendicular to each other. Okay, so these are the two types of tides, neap tide and spring tide, that should be understood with respect to the positioning of Sun, Moon and the Earth. There, the third important topic, the third important subtopic in this oceanic circulation is regarding oceanic currents. So what is meant by oceanic current? Oceanic current is nothing but a stream of water flowing continuously on the surface of the ocean. That means oceanic current is nothing but it is like rivers in the ocean. Okay, these currents will be flowing continuously without any break. Okay, that particular movement is called as an oceanic current. And if you see this oceanic current, we can see two different types of oceanic currents. One, warm oceanic current, second, cold oceanic current. So in exam point of view, it is very important to understand what is meant by warm oceanic current or how these warm oceanic currents were formed. And there are some certain conditions to see when no, there are certain conditions where this warm oceanic currents will be forming and cold oceanic currents will be forming, and we should be knowing the examples of some warm oceanic currents as well as cold oceanic currents. But the point here is, in this particular chapter, he has not gone into the detailed analysis of this concept. In this particular chapter, he was mentioning only about the definitions of these important topics that were given in this particular chapter. Okay, so if you see these oceanic currents, try to remember using this map. If you see in this map, you will be finding red lines as well as blue lines. All the red lines will be having are known as warm oceanic currents. All the blue lines which is presented on this map, we call these blue lines as cold oceanic currents. Okay, if you see this particular picture, the behavior of warm oceanic current in southern hemisphere will be somewhat different, and in northern hemisphere it will be somewhat different. And if you observe here, see, the warm oceanic currents usually found in eastern side of continents. Okay, if you see South American continent as well as African continent as well as Asian continent, okay, as well as Australian continent. In southern hemisphere, usually you will be finding warm oceanic currents in eastern side of continents, and cold oceanic currents are found in western side of the continents. Okay, so there is a reason behind this. So what is that particular reason, we will be seeing in the higher classes. And if you see in northern hemisphere as well, we will be seeing in the direction. If you see in southern hemisphere, they will be moving in anti-clockwise direction, and if you see in northern hemisphere, these currents will be moving in clockwise direction. Okay, so we will be seeing why this is happening and how this is happening and when this is going to happen. So all these things we will be learning in the higher classes. So in this 7th class chapter, what we should understand is, we should understand three things. One, what is meant by water cycle? What are the concepts that we have to understand in order to understand this water cycle? And in second part or second half of second part, what we should understand is, we should be understanding the distribution of water on the surface of the earth. And third part in this particular chapter is regarding oceanic circulation. Okay, so all these things are basic important things that we should understand. So thank you so much for watching this video. So we'll be meeting in next class. So in next class, we'll be seeing the 6th chapter of 7th class NCRT.